I wasn't originally going to review this episode as part of this month, but after rewatching this episode and the fact that Grizz actually gets some development in this is honestly one of the best writers who obviously gets overlooked. But then again, at this time, Steven Universe, Adventure Time, along with other great cartoons were on the way, so it's really odd to see We Bare Bears debut in Cartoon Network in 2015 by the likes of Adventure Time, Regular Show, The Amazing World of Gumball, and Steven Universe all going on in one time. Not really one time, but running at the network during that time in 2015. I know some of you guys are probably expecting me to talk about this episode involving this is similar to I Love a Patty to Love a Patty from SpongeBob SquarePants, but the Mysterious Mentor did that 5 or 6 years ago, and me discussing about it now is probably going to be a lot more redundant. Besides, for how much I'm really grossed out from that episode, what this episode does right is mainly the fact that the main characters are bears and not a character who is, let's just say, too flanderized that can be considered one of the best cartoon characters after the movie that premiered in 2004. At this point, the less I talk about SpongeBob, the better. But anyway, Grizz eats so many burritos so that he can be part of the challenge into eating so many burritos at the restaurant that he along with his brothers are in. And then he must eat the giant burrito on the menu. And he doesn't because he instantly falls in love with it. And the fact that this episode is basically a better version of the episode I've mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure that the writers of this show can really tell that SpongeBob honestly really went too ahead when it comes to the first draft. While this probably was the first draft, but a very first draft that the writers actually knew what they were doing. With Grizz refusing to eat the giant burrito, he befriends it as a friend, and this made Panda and Iceberg really off with the idea. And since that the majority of this episode has the burrito completely covered up with tinfoil, the first time I've watched this episode, I honestly thought that they're gonna open up the burrito, but apparently they didn't. And the closest that we get discussed from this episode is that the characters smell the stench from the burrito after 24 hours or longer of how long it has been eaten. And I can say that this episode honestly is probably one of the most memorable if you completely put in the beginning of this episode involving the opening of Baby Grizz completely hanging from a tree and the fire people decide to take him down. Tell me about it. This episode becomes a lot more aged the more this episode gets older. And I've always said age in the last episode review that I've uploaded. I would go on involving the relationship of Grizz and the burrito, but we will probably be here much longer, so I'm gonna go fast forward a bit. Panda and Iceberg go online to see that there's so many people in families get so attached to their foods. Just by watching this, it honestly shows how weird this entire world is, but also for not one of the most creepiest ways. I mean, granted, being attached to food is creepy, but considering that they don't do it in a really disgusting way, it's honestly a lot more tolerable to sit through. Panda and Iceberg take the burrito away from Grizz during the night, but apparently they caught red-handed. So Panda and Iceberg ran outside of the home as fast as they can so that they can get rid of the burrito. They go up to a hydro tower in order to dispose of the burrito. Yes, I know I said. And just when they're about to do it for Grizz's own good, a lightning storm zaps the burrito, turning it to ashes. And this completely stunned Grizz, but not long until he feels better afterwards. What this episode does a lot more better is the fact that they actually added Panda and Iceberg into the mix instead of having Grizz being the main focus of this episode. It really shows that if you have more characters introduced in this episode involving a plot that has been done before, but executed a lot more better, I can really see that this episode is really one of the best. Not to mention the fact that we get to see the flashback of what Grizz was before he met Panda in Icebell and before that sitcom they went to. During the flashback where the firemen are trying to save him, he sees the fabric around the fireman's arm, and that's why he's so attached to it, because of how silver it is. This is the same Belle who went through a lot of situations as his younger self, and then when he's doing with the same thing with his older self, because the tinfoil around the burrito was the same color as the fabric that you saw before, Grizz really had an interesting backstory. Granted, it's not the best backstory when it comes to comparing Icebell, but it's still better than Panda's. I will talk about the Panda episode, but at the same time, there was so much to discuss about this show that it's going to take me a long time to get to. It really actually makes sense onto why this show continued to have Baby Belle episodes after this episode, just to see the relationship of the cubs before they got older and older. And let me tell you that with a spin-off involving the Belles, I'm honestly fine with it, even if it ditched the idea of having more seasons. But considering that the movie actually ended off with an interesting note, this scene alone honestly shows a lot more when it comes to what the Belles usually went through when they got older and older. And just by seeing clips like this, I honestly think that they didn't know what to deliver after the 4th season when they will begin production on the movie after the final episode of season 4 came out. Getting back to the main plot, I really think of what they had involving Panda and Icebell really shows that they actually care about Grizz in this situation. Because let me tell you, when it comes to the other infamous episodes, the other characters are careless while also being disgusted, which I can easily condone with, but at the same time, for how poorly executed that episode was, for how executed this episode is by not having every single character being selfish in this episode only, it really makes this episode a lot more watchable, and it's really a shame that this show honestly didn't get a lot more attention compared to the other cartoons. Yes, this is a slice of life show, but at the same time, slice of life shows actually deserve some kind of attention, no matter if they don't have the same genres or themes when it comes to other shows. I can say that this episode is a must watch when it comes to new fans of this franchise, but at the same time, you probably won't be able to see a lot more when it comes to the later episodes that are going to be much more better than this. I did state that in my last review that I gave it an 8 out of 10, but as for this review, from this episode at least, it gets an 8.5 out of 10. I'm just saying that I've seen better episodes from this, and the best highlights from this is mainly the flashback involving Grizz and his cub life while he got rescued. And just by seeing him dealing with a relationship with a burrito being covered in tinfoil, I probably don't blame him on being attached to it. Because if the tinfoil was completely something else that isn't solvable, his behavior will probably be a lot more stupid and a lot more confusing when we completely see his backstory. Then again, these Belles spend most of their lives staying at San Francisco after they got older, and they didn't attend to any school once they got older, so I really shouldn't expect a lot more from 3 memorable Belles from this show.
Let's get this started again. Me and my whole crew, we live with no